over to you.
Hello. So on the topic of bigging yourself up, my talk is about all of the stuff that I fucked up launching our last game. We are allowed to swear on you.
Yeah.
I wish I'd known that.
Everyone loves mini golf, right? Quick little who am I? I'm Tony Dowland. I've been in the games industry for about 25 years now, 24 years. I run a company, a small indie company in Edinburgh called Ukie Hub Crawl. We do a mix of our own original IP. We've made 3 games, Binaries, Dern Job and Dungeon Golf. We do work for hire stuff for other indies, largely that's porting their games to consoles and stuff like that. We've worked on John Wick Hex, Thomas Was Alone, Yes Your Grace, a bunch of stuff, done a bunch of platforms, blah 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 blah. Sorry, I'm speeding this up because from where I was sat at the back, I could smell all of the pizza, and I suspect you can all smell the pizza as well. So we'll blast through this. Don't you worry yourselves. So what was Dungeon Golf? Dungeon Golf is mini golf in a dungeon. It basically sells itself, right? You play characters like this daft little frog. You play mini golf through a dungeon. It's hero-based multiplayer, local and online multiplayer mini golf game. You play as a skeleton, you play as a wizard. Everyone's got special abilities that you charge up. You beat all of your friends. It's really pretty good. The Steam reviews, as you can see, we've got an 85% positive rating on Steam. 85%, you can't get higher than 85%. Can you spot the problem in this slide? Can you see where the issue is?
34 reviews.
Yes, 34 user reviews.
Is there something else I can help with?
Probably not at this point. We're way too deep for that. Yeah, so this talk is all the things that I did wrong self-promotion in Dungeon Golf. Well, actually, no, not all of the things. This is only 15 minutes talk. So, yeah, we're going to do, I believe it's called Radical Candor. It's going to be quite brutal. I'll maybe have a big cry at the end. We can all hug and then I'll feel a lot better about myself, okay? So let's just kind of dive in then with point 1, price. It was way too expensive. £15 doesn't sound like a lot for a video game. It's a game that is best played with 3 of your friends, either, like I said, like kind of like local or online multiplayer. So 15 quid's not a lot, but if you're trying to persuade 3 of your friends to also buy it, you're talking 60 quid, and it's like trying to persuade a bunch of people to put out 60 quid for a game where it's an unknown developer. Like, as much as I would love to pick ourselves up, we are basically an unknown developer. It was a brand new IP. It's a real struggle at the best of times, but particularly like kind of in this economic climate, trying to persuade people to put out that amount of money, I think was silly. This, more than anything, if I got to have my time again, we would have sold Dungeon Golf for probably 4 quid, 5 quid, something like that. Really try and go for that impulse price. It was in early access. I've gone for, I couldn't find a good picture for this, so I just went for Google image search for some lovely 90s web style graphics. Early access sounds good, doesn't it? In early access, you can get a bit of money coming in. It's, you know, you've said that the game's, it's not quite finished yet, so people maybe a little bit more forgiving of bugs. One of the problems with early access is you don't get on the new and trending in Steam. Like, Steam will not give you the same amount of visibility. So immediately you're kind of cutting your own legs off a little bit. And also you're splitting your audience a bit, because some people will not buy early access games. I'm one of them. I don't buy early access games. What the fuck was I doing launching an early access game when I don't play early access games? And again, this maybe works for like kind of bigger studios and like people where it's like you've got a following. It's like, I'm sure someone will go like, oh yeah, but Hades 2 launched into early access, and it's like, yeah, we're not Hades 2, right? So yeah, when you're a small developer, when you've got like original IP and you're trying to build that kind of stuff up, like taking these actions that just keep cutting away at your potential player base, especially for a multiplayer game, it's not a good idea. And the other problem with early access is that you kind of commit to it. So really quickly, when Dungeon Golf launched, we realised it's like, look, this hasn't worked. It's not selling. But the problem is you can't. Well, I mean, you can cut and run in early access. You could just walk away from it. But we didn't want to be labelled as like kind of scammy devs, because it's like, you know, we have ambitions to release future games on Steam. More on that later. Spoilers. But you don't want to have like this kind of following label following around of like, look, these people kind of don't finish their games. So even though we knew it wasn't selling and that we knew that we couldn't afford to keep working on it, you still had to get like line up a couple of updates and kind of line up, okay, we need to get to a version 1 launch so that we can kind of tie a bow in this and say, all right, we're done with that. Number 3, we chose a fucking awful launch week. Yeah, I mean, obviously with launch weeks, you pick a date a bit in the future, and then as you're getting towards it, other people announce their games and launch their games. So we went up against Lies of P, which that's a single player game, that's no problem. We also ended up launching one day before Party Animals, which is one of the most wishlisted games in Steam history, and is a multiplayer, brawling, daft party cartoon thing. What were we thinking? What were we thinking? I mean, yeah, like I say, you can't plan in advance with this, but as we got closer to that, and as we saw that these things were coming up, we should have just bit the bullet and gone like, do you know what, we're going to push back by like a couple of weeks and kind of move our date. It was quite ridiculous. This is what Google Image Search said is a man being stealthy. God only knows. We didn't shout about the game early enough. We should have had the Steam page for Dungeon Golf live probably a year before we did, a whole year before we did. We just took that mindset of like, look, we'll have a bit more art polish. It's not quite ready yet. It's not quite ready to put in front of people yet. We can't start taking screenshots of it yet and stuff like that. And it meant that we'd kind of, by the time that we were being public with the game and kind of showing it to people, we were already like really, I would say, kind of like overcommitted into our budget and into our schedule, and we just didn't have the flexibility at that point to really adjust to the realities of what we were going up against. It's like by the time like we realised that like the marketing just isn't cutting through, people aren't really responding to this in the way that we thought that they might. You were already a year further down the line than we could have been, and if we were a year earlier, we could have adjusted our scope, adjusted our budget. Genuinely, like sure, there's an audience of people that enjoy Dungeon Golf. I just don't think there's an audience that is big enough for the kind of scope and budget of the game that we were making. So yeah, this is kind of a thing of like, I think that it's very easy to get into that sort of perfectionist thing of like, oh, we can't show it yet, we can't show it yet, we can't show it yet, and you really just need to kind of get things in front of people. We also, like, we didn't take it to like kind of like free local shows and kind of get people hands-on with it until like probably about a year and 3 months or something into development. And again, it's that sort of thing of like, we spent a phenomenal amount of money taking that game to Gamescom, and that was our first big public show, and almost immediately as soon as people start playing it, you realise like, oh shit, people that aren't familiar with this don't understand the controls at all and can't play it. And it's like, oh my god, like, we should have had such a better battle-tested build where it's like we'd had this in front of people and we'd stood and watched people playing it, and all of that way before we got to that point. Don't worry, we're halfway through now. Stay strong. I didn't understand Steam events. So, like I said, we've done a lot of stuff where we've kind kind of published games for other developers on consoles, kind of understood all of the console ecosystem. There's a load of weird little bits and bobs around Steam that were new to me, and one of the things is that they have these fests where they're always themed, and games that match that theme get into a fest. And we approached this, or I approached this specifically. I keep saying I because whenever I talk about Dungeon Golf, it's the team's game. We made a good game. All of these decisions that I'm talking about today are ones that largely were on my shoulders, so that's why I say I with that stuff. So we approached Sportsfest, and I thought, this is cool, we're making a sports game. This will get us some extra visibility, we'll get loads of extra wish lists, all of that kind of stuff. You can see here, Sportsfest started on that day there and ended on that day there. I did an extra day at either side so you can see what our kind of general organics were around the point and how little of a difference really Sportsfest actually made. We had a playtest running using Steam's playtest system. It turns out that Steam's playtest system, like Steam's own algorithm, really doesn't treat it in the same way that Steam treats demos. Having a demo up for a game is a very different thing from running a playtest. And it's that sort of like really basic misunderstanding of how these different things kind of fit together in Steam that scuppered us quite a lot. And also like Steam, these kind of fests and stuff like that, Steam, you can't use them to bring an audience to your game. Steam won't make an audience for you. You need to bring your audience, and then Steam will amplify your game. Once it realizes that you're bringing people in and that you are actually able to get attention on your stuff, it will boost that up. So yeah, if you're kind of approaching this as a like, oh yeah, just being in this will get us thousands of extra wish lists, and I'm sure that people have all seen this week, because Next Fest is going on, there are a bunch of developers that are posting on Twitter, sorry, X, about like, oh, we got 30,000 wish lists this week, thank you very much. They're in the vanishing minority, and almost all of those have brought their audience there in the first place. Yeah, so over the course of Sportsfest, you got 68 wish lists. For all of the work and effort that we put in, we'd planned extra content, we dropped a new character in the middle of Sportsfest and all of that kind of stuff. 68 wish lists. I could get more than that with £5 worth of Twitter adverts. And speaking of wish lists, there's a whole industry of people who basically make money out of drawing up pseudoscience around what wish lists mean and